Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and here I have a iPhone. Here I have a Google Pixel. If I asked you, Muta, which one of these two phones do criminals love to use? It's probably not this one. It's actually probably the Google Pixel. Now you might be wondering, whoa, is Google that safe and secure that criminals are using it? Fuck no. Ladies and gentlemen, it's actually the underlying operating system. Now Android is Android. But I showed you GrapheneOS, and the reason I'm showing this to you again is it's actually under attack by states, and it's actually under attack by the mainstream media for being the criminal's choice of software, even though I would say, much like the dark web, the Tor browser, you know, the thing that I browse, the thing that I've shown you so many websites on, it can be used by good people and unfortunately bad people, but the technology behind it is designed to keep you safe and private in a world that doesn't want you anymore. Now, one of my things about sponsorships is I have to actually use the product. Now, I use things like Gamer Subs, Code SOG, by the way. I love when these guys send me flavors like BBL. You know, I got my mom asking me what a BBL is, and sometimes she comes over and sees this stuff, and that is the only few times that I'm completely flashbang. It's a lot easier for me to show her the cherry limesicle. I'm like, Ma, look at this. It's Gooner Tubs, okay? That's what it is. It just fuels me up. But I have a rule when it comes to sponsorships. I actually have to use the product. And, you know, when it comes to VPNs, there's not many products that I can actually recommend that are like Mullvad VPN. Now, the reason I mention Mullvad VPN is not because I'm getting paid by them or anything. It's because I actually use this as my primary VPN. And why do I use this as my primary VPN? It's because they were rated in 2023 and they gave up no information from me or anybody that was using their stuff. They said on April 18, 2023, 6 officers came in at the Swedish police, the National Operations Department. They came to their offices intending to seize computers with customer data. But they literally didn't have the data to begin with. You know, a lot of these VPN companies can say, oh, we keep you completely safe and private. You'll never really know until the man comes in, breaks the door down, takes away the hard drives, and finds absolutely nothing. That, ladies and gentlemen, is probably the best clean advertisement that you can ever give a service like this. But this is not about Mullvad VPN. Going back to the Google Pixel, one of the important pieces of software on this was GrapheneOS. Now, to give you an idea, if you ever want to use a phone that is completely secure, or the most secure phone that is out there, especially if you care about your privacy, your safety, let's say you don't want some random criminal breaking into your phone, GrapheneOS is a great option. Do you not want any government breaking into your phone and looking through your personal files, whether they be, you know, whatever it may be? You have sensitive stuff on your phone, I imagine. You know, a lot of you probably have, you know, emails, you probably have messages, you probably have photos of you or your partner or family members or something that you just don't want other people that aren't in your family to see, all right? There is a certain amount of privacy that I think people are entitled to, and it's insane we have to fight to maintain some of that privacy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to give you a quick idea of what's going on, if you want to achieve this phone, in the EU, you can purchase things like a Nitro phone, which is actually a company that sells the Google Pixel with GrapheneOS installed. Now, you can just go to Google's actual website and you can purchase any of their phones right here. So, for instance, if you want, go pick up the Google Pixel 9 or the 9A. I'm not sure if you can pick up the 10 or anything yet. But if you choose to get like a Google Pixel 9, it's probably around $500 Canadian. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it is a phone, ladies and gentlemen. Just get the one that is more affordable for you, and then go right over to GrapheneOS's website. It's actually so easy to install this. All you need, ladies and gentlemen, is quite literally a USB cable. So you see one of these right here? You put one end into unlocking within the settings of your Google Pixel, because yes, these phones are actually designed for you to install custom operating systems too. You know, it's a lot like the Steam Deck. You can buy one of these. You don't have to use Valve's operating system. You can just wipe the thing clean and install Windows if you wanted. Hell, you could probably install Mac OS if you really desired. But you can go back to your Android phone, enable OEM unlocking, and then going all the way down over here, you can plug it into your computer, unlock the bootloader, download the actual operating system, and then flash it onto your system, and then relock the bootloader as well, which you absolutely should do. Once you've done these 4 steps, you've installed GrapheneOS, you now have one of the most secure smartphones. A smartphone that it seems governments are actually scared of. You know you're actually secure when the states, when law enforcement, when the mainstream media is making this look like it's one of the most dangerous fucking devices known to man. Now I want to start off by saying that you are not a bad person for wanting your privacy and wanting your safety and security. If you use a phone like this, you're not a criminal. Yes, criminals use phones like this. You know what criminals also use? They use Glocks. They use vehicles you and I drive. They use a lot of things. Individual things that by themselves don't really mean much. It's the intention of the human being using them. And I'm sorry, when it comes to user privacy and security, as much as I don't like criminals or drug dealers or any of these kind of people, ultimately, I'm not going to have them be the reason that we somehow give up any form of our safety just because the state media doesn't want us to, just because the state doesn't want us to, all while at the same time using these same technologies to protect themselves. You know, it's one thing, right? Companies or like the government wants to get rid of like VPNs in certain places. You know, it's okay, get rid of the VPNs for the average person. But what about the politicians? What about the elite? What about law enforcement? They're somehow allowed to protect themselves, but you can't? Get the fuck out of here. So yes, arguably one of the most secure phones is a Google Pixel that is actually loaded with Android that is hardened and secured far more than anything you can get out of the box from one of the mainstream vendors, or even if you go to Apple. Even though in my opinion, iPhones are probably more secure and private just out of the box, more so than Android out of the box. But GrapheneOS trumps all of it. Now I've been using this phone for a little bit of time. I wanted to actually try it, and honestly, it's about the best experience that you could have. Again, for most people, having a basic internet browser, you know, you can install apps like YouTube, various games that you're interested into. It does support all of the stuff that you're used to on base Android. It just comes with a lot of these security and protections that ultimately you want. And even though some phones are kind of out of date, just because they're actually old now at this point, the actual GrapheneOS system works exceptionally well. Pop in a SIM card, use it like you would any standard Android phone, and just get all the perks of safety and security delivered right here. So why am I talking about GrapheneOS once again? Well, it's because they're actually under attack, this time by the French government specifically, but they've always been under attack. Now, GrapheneOS gets a bad rap because generally what happens is law enforcement in their direct quotations make it look as if it's primarily just the criminal operating system. Remember, there's been a lot of actual projects that have been used by criminals, like the Anom phone, which then turned out to be an FBI honeypot that they used to arrest and stop transnational drug cartels, and again, smugglers. But when it comes to GrapheneOS is used by a lot of people for general purpose and safety, but it is used by criminals in order to protect their devices. So eventually, if these do get seized by the government, breaking into them and grabbing that sweet, sweet evidence becomes nearly impossible. Even some of the best intelligence agencies and, you know, firms in the world that operate in this kind of stuff, like Celebrite, actually have difficulty, near impossibility, hacking into these graphene systems, even compared to other more commercial options. So yeah, if, again, law enforcement agencies are pissed at it, it's because they can't break into it. And ultimately, that protects you. So again, when it came to Catalonia, Spain, they actually alerted. The cops were primarily looking at people who carried some of these Google Pixel phones, because they had associated these Pixel phones, because you can install GrapheneOS onto them, as possible drug dealer phones, right? They became the ultimate criminal phone to have. So GrapheneOS is flagged by Catalan police due to the security and privacy-focused nature of a custom mobile operating system. Recent models, such as that Google Pixel 9, have hardware memory tagging support, which offers a huge security improvement when GrapheneOS is installed. Another big feature is that it does full disk and metadata encryption. So for instance, if you're somebody, again, like if it gets seized and you actually have compromising things on this, they can't break into it. But that doesn't just protect you from law enforcement, that also protects you from hackers. That also protects you from really anybody. Nobody should be able to break into your phone but you. Now, when it comes to GrapheneOS, for now, it actually only really supports Google Pixel because of the hardware associated. But I do think down the road, with more Snapdragon systems, they might be broadening their support. Generally, if you want a secure phone, it's usually Google Pixel because they're the ones that allow you to install these operating systems, and they come with the hardware for the ultimate protection of your device. And GrapheneOS also comes in at the cusp when Google recently, 3 months ago, I talked about it, made it so that Android sideloading was going to become more of a controlled effort, meaning that your ownership of your phone started to get lessened. Because it's a de-Googled Android experience, because it's an Android experience that's separate, they really don't have to conform with some of the shittiest decisions that Google made. Which, by the way, Google kind of walked back and said, for anybody that's dealing with Android, we're introducing a new advanced flow, meaning that it's going to be an extra few options that you have to go through to install your APKs, which if this is true, good rollback, Google. But again, you can't necessarily trust any of these companies. We're slowly moving towards a world where, you get an approved device and you can only install the approved apps 10 years from now. That's the conditioning that this market is setting in. The reason why these phones are important is because they're the last bastions of actual real human security and real human privacy in a day and age when that is slowly withering away. Now, what makes France really important in the story is when we looked at things like chat control, France was pretty much, from my understanding, all for things like breaking user encryption and allowing the state to read your messages without your consent, without anything so much as a warrant even. So when it comes to GrapheneOS, they are taking state actions against their operating system, against their project. They're conflating us with companies which they've previously gone after and taken over their servers. So what France wants is backdoor access into the GrapheneOS's servers. Now, GrapheneOS doesn't store user data on their servers, but you still don't want them to have fucking access to your system at all. It's fucking insane. We aren't vulnerable to being attacked in the same way, but we still don't want accesses to our website, network services being logged, or our website being hijacked. France isn't a safe country for GrapheneOS to operate in anymore, and we're going to be protecting the project and our users by avoiding the country completely now. So again, for them, the only option is, if a company starts threatening them or a country starts threatening them, is to just leave the area of operations. Because it turns out that in certain parts of the European Union, not all parts, they don't really appreciate user privacy and safety. A lot of these guys mentioned that these are phones used by terrorists, drug dealers, and whatnot. And while that is true, obviously because of the privacy-focused nature, even if you decide to hijack these services, those guys are just going to find other methods. All this really does is attack the general safety and privacy that we kind of have. And I think a lot of this comes not because they want to protect you against drug traffickers, child molesters, terrorists, because they can probably still do that if they wanted to. I mean, we're talking about an entire region of the world where you've got serious issues still going on to this day that are operating pretty unchecked. They want to go after this primarily because it is the last bastion for you to stay away from the state and their increasingly draconian view on whatever the fuck it is that you're doing in your private life. This is the only way for you to fight back. They know it's one of the only ways for you to fight back, and that is why they're encroaching onto it. It's a matter of time before they go onto this, then they go onto things like the Tor browser, and so on and so forth. And even though there's been a lot of French journalists that have kind of fear-mongered and said that, oh no, this is for the criminels. No, not necessarily. It's not so much the actual media. It's more so the anger that these guys get because government agencies want them to absolutely go after their servers and get backdoor access. So the companies that GrapheneOS was kind of compared to were something like EncroChat, which for anybody that doesn't know, these were actually companies that existed that distributed smartphones. It was EncroChat, and there were other companies like Sky ECC, which sold Google Pixels with their own version of Sky ECC. And what these were primarily were actually operating systems that were bundled with applications that, fed to different social media services. So social media services, or rather messaging platforms, which is where the bread and butter was. So you could, for instance, load up the Sky ECC messaging tool, and you could use all these features to talk. Well, it turns out, according to law enforcement, that a grand majority of the users here were most likely just people in organized, criminal circles. Now, the difference between these things and GrapheneOS is GrapheneOS isn't necessarily selling any sort of messaging service or anything. It just comes down to an operating system that gives you that freedom. Now, of course, obviously, because of how France has been kind of operating, in this situation, they've decided that in order to at least somewhat survive, they're moving to other countries. And what other countries? Well, let's look at them. So where they said they're going to be moving it, or they're going to be changing it to servers in places like Toronto, for instance. So represent right over here. Even though I personally don't think Canada is a smart area to move to, considering the fact that we're also not a country that cares so much about user privacy, it seems. Really, I think the scary part about this is one of the only few options that we have in order to have like a real privacy and safety secured. Unfortunately, no matter which country you move to, no matter how it operates, law enforcement agencies are more closely aligned, especially against this kind of stuff, than I would like. Because if it's something is kind of okay in France, you can bet your ass in a year or two it'll be okay in places like Canada. It'll be okay in places like the United States. It's really a long campaign for us to keep trying to preserve the little bit of privacy and safety that we have. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know that a phone can be effective against the big man, it's probably one of these phones. Because if it pisses off the government to the point where they're asking you to put in back doors or have access, and you decide to tell them fuck off, and then you get labeled as the criminal-friendly phone, there's probably a chance, in my opinion, that you're doing something right. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, GrapheneOS, it's actually proven itself as one of the only last bastions of real mobile safety and freedom. It's either this or get a fucking Linux phone at the end of the day. And I actually like using my phone as opposed to just praying to God that it functions every day. So yeah, if you want something that is easy, something that is useful, something that is actually proven to work, I guess a Google Pixel with all the Google crap removed is the smart way to go. But ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mullvad, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, I am out.